to you by the Johannesburg Stock Exchange Derivative Markets. Proper tools for proper trading.
No matter how far you go, remember where you're from. Today's news leader is brought to you by Shivers. Live with chivalry.
Welcome to News Leader. Oil and gas exploration group SacOil Holdings released first half numbers a couple of days ago, and joining me now in studio is Robin Vela, the CEO. Robin, thanks very much for coming through.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Robin, what are some of the operational highlights of this period? It's been very tumultuous, not least for shareholders, I have to say.
Sure.
But from your perspective, some of the key points to mention.
Well, the key aspects are, one, we brought Total into our Block 3 asset. And that's key for us because it both financially and operationally de-risks the asset for us and for shareholders. Secondly, we strengthened the board by bringing on board John Bentley and Bill Guest, each of who have over 35 years experience in the oil and gas industry. And we also strengthened the management team by bringing on board Bradley Surf, who's our Vice President, formerly of Petro SA. And lastly, we listed on AIM. And listing on AIM obviously gives us access to European markets.
Just going back to the farm out of the DRC asset to Total, how much money do you actually net from that deal? Because you still own a portion of it, as far as I understand.
Well, in total, the total farm out number was $129 million, but it's paid in stages. And that $129 million is both to ourselves and to our partner, our local partner, DIG. So in net terms, the total net to SacOil Holdings is somewhere in the region of $50 million, of which we've been paid $7.5 million.
Okay, so when do you expect the balance of that to come through?
Well, it comes in stages. I mean, the agreement with Total is that within 3 years of completion, so that's by March 2014, we should have reached what they call final investment decision. At that point, there's a net amount of $29 million that will come to SacOil, and then 2 years thereafter, we should reach first oil, and at that point there's an additional $25 million that comes to SacOil.
Okay.
But what's also important is that we retain a 12.5% interest, effective interest in the asset. But what's also important is that Total carry us for all exploration expense from now right through to the time that we get final investment decision.
So it's quite a sweet deal for you, basically.
It's sweet in the sense that we get a super major to come in and partner us.
Yeah.
It's unusual for them to do so at this stage, but I think the address was of interest to them, and the address is what attracted them to us.
Okay. What about the jump in assets? Net asset value is 379% up in the period. Does that relate partly to the money that is now coming through to SacOil?
Correct. It relates partly to the deal that we've done with Total. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out that the asset is worth more to us having done a deal with Total than not having done a deal with Total. And there's a myriad of reasons. They'll expedite the time to exploration, they bring their skills, they bring their experience, and they bring the big badge which we all need.
Now, just on the issue of funding, you secured new funding. I think it includes a $25 million facility from a company called Yorkville. But more intriguingly for me was the deal that you struck with Timtex Investments. So you're to issue new shares.
Right.
You get 75 million rands from Timtex. But that deal, so as I understand it, you've got the money, but both deals still need to get shareholder approval. So, I mean, how does that work? Surely you need to get shareholder approval first before actually embarking on a
Well, hopefully we'll get shareholders approval tomorrow. Both those meetings happen tomorrow. But in effect, Timtex is an existing shareholder. So they are a shareholder that understands what we're trying to do. They're a supportive shareholder. And they've come up with an additional $10 million which they've injected into SacOil. Prior to actually taking the money, we clearly did sound out to ensure that we'll get the support of shareholders. So I'm pretty confident that we'll get that through. That's an additional $10 million of equity money that comes into SacOil, for which we'll issue shares.
So then going back to the whole net cash position or the net funding that you have access to, what is that figure now, given the fact that you've had the farm out with Total, you've raised this new funding with Timtex and also with Yorkville?
Well, there's $10 million that comes from Timtex. We've got a $25 million facility that's with Yorkville that we can draw down in tranches, and I'll explain the facility to you in a second. That $35 million excluding the money that we had, that we have access to from Total. That $35 million is what we plan to utilize on our Nigerian assets. Bearing in mind that our DRC asset, we don't have to put another cent into that because we're fully covered by Total. So the $35 million that we have access to now, we'll seek to use to progress work on our Nigerian assets and expedite the time to production of our Nigerian assets, which I'm sure will make our South African investors happier once they start seeing revenue coming from our assets and us talking about production as opposed to exploration.
And can you give us a time frame on production?
I still always talk about 18 months. I still always talk about 18 to 24 months. I think that's a realistic time frame. I think now having access to the facility and the cash, we can progress that. We would look to fast track it. It's in our interest to fast track it, but 18 to 24 months is a realistic time frame.
Well, when you talk about happy shareholders, now they were very happy shareholders in SacOil last year, then it all kind of blew up and went pear. But you had some big investors, some big backers like the PIC, a couple of other asset managers. Are they still with SacOil or have they sold out?
All shareholders that were with us at the time remain with us. The support still remains there. I'm talking about the likes of Metropolitan Asset Managers, the PIC, Investec Bank, the Enche Group. Those are all still significant shareholders in SacOil. When you talk about the blowout, clearly our share had a long run, and it had a big run prior to our listing on AIM. Now that run might have been on speculation, might have been on enthusiasm, but the reality is our story has actually got stronger, not weaker, since listing on AIM. I think one of the issues we had is we didn't actually do a liquidity event when we actually listed on AIM. So not doing a liquidity event didn't actually give direction to the South African shareholders that they were seeking from a UK investor's perspective.
When you talk about liquidity event, do you mean actually issuing new shares on AIM?
Absolutely right. When we went on to AIM, we did an introduction to AIM as opposed to
a capital raising.
A capital raising on AIM. Okay. And hence there has been limited liquidity on AIM and therefore limited interest by UK institutions.
Are you still keen to do a capital raising at some stage? You put off a private placement because of the whole issue around the share price, but is that still on the cards?
Well, no, a private placement is definitely not on the cards at this point in time. We've got sufficient capital to do what we need to do. Clearly with the share price where it is, it'll be highly dilutionary for shareholders. Not having done a liquidity event when a placing when our share price was R1.50, I'm not about to do so now when our share price is further south to that. Having said that, we want to progress. We've got access to a lot more opportunities that are out there, and if it is value accretive to shareholders, even with the dilution, we would look to it.
And just very quickly to end off with, Robin, are you seeing the benefits of having an AIM exposure starting to come through?
Absolutely. We've now got a lot of coverage. Deals that are being presented to us because we're on the radar of other oil and gas companies. We're now getting research written on us by independents. Such research is now being shared amongst the investor community, and that investor community now can understand from an independent's point of view their view on SacOil, which is rather better than the management always trumping out their view on SacOil.
Yeah, indeed. Well, we have to leave it there, Robin. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
That is Robin Vela, the CEO of SacOil Holdings.
No matter how far you go, remember where you're from. Today's news leader was brought to you by Shivers. Live with chivalry.
What if you discovered a way to increase your profits, cut costs, develop new products, and reach new markets? And what if this way of increasing your profitability led to other